Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos, where industry leaders share their thoughts and experience on the future of space business, policy, and opportunity. If you like Constellations, please support us by giving a rating and review on iTunes. And don't forget to share this podcast online to help our community grow.
Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Adam Maher, CEO of Ursa Space Systems. And we are live from the floor of Satellite 2020 in Washington, D.C. With this interview, we will discuss how SAR satellites are changing the space industry and how this new technology is impacting markets across the globe. Our guest is Adam Maher, CEO of Ursa Space Systems, a startup company that uses SAR satellites to provide insights into various industries such as energy and oil and gas. Ursa bridges the gap between information-rich data and those companies that are breaking new ground in global intelligence. At Ursa, they want to turn data into impact. Is that right, Adam?
Yes, yep.
Good. Having fun at the conference so far?
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, yeah, definitely. For me, I used to build satellites and was in the space industry, and so for me, it's a gathering of meeting old friends. Now that especially that I'm not necessarily building a satellite anymore, I'm actually on the side of bringing in data and how do I take the data from these satellites and use it.
I would never be cool enough to say I used to build satellites. That's really a cool thing at this conference, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I guess so.
Well, let's start off with SAR here. So, what is the difference between SAR and a traditional satellite?
Yeah, so traditionally, especially if we look at the remote sensing industry, individuals, when you look at Google Maps, you're looking at an optical image. And so the great thing about radar versus an optical image is, I like to joke for those of us on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., we know that pretty much from October to March, we don't see the sun. And if you have an optical satellite, the same is true. You won't see through the clouds, you won't see at nighttime, versus the radar, the synthetic aperture radar satellites, they see through the clouds, they see at night, and what it really does for the industries I work with is actually bring consistency to that data.
So instead of 12 hours of literal darkness and data darkness, you open up to 24-hour period of information.
Exactly. And I mean, I think if a lot of the countries we work with, especially if you look around the world, I mean, parts of China make the east coast of the United States look like a tropical paradise. The amount of, if you think about the amount of clouds that are in some of these countries, it really, you really can't make these analytics when you're thinking about, what's the trade coming in and out of a port. If it's 20, 60 days in between cloud-free image, how much activity has changed in a port, in that time frame.
Well, Adam, you're the founder of Ursa Space. So what made you decide to start the business and work with SAR satellites?
Yeah, so really what it was is, so a few years, I guess a little over 5 years ago now, I was actually working kind of when the small sats were just starting to come into the markets. So you had the companies, the Planet Labs, the Skyboxes. They were bringing in the optical imagery into the space, and so I was working with a number of those companies, and I started talking to a number of potential customers, and they all. I had one meeting. I remember I sat around a table, and everyone looked at me. They're like, so this is great. We really love this idea of, even I think Planet says, take a picture of the world every day, but there's clouds. And they're like, can you, and so a lot of people asked, at that time, they asked me, can you take and build a radar version of these satellites? And so that's where we started off life is, how do we started off life and we said, could I build a small radar satellite? And that's where we started from.
Great. So your company has a unique approach to connecting people to information-rich data derived from SAR. I guess that's your separating factor, isn't it?
Yeah, so we really took the approach of, when we originally started this company, we were originally looking at building satellites. But one thing that happened is when we started connecting with various customers around the world who had tried to use radar data, and then when we also started looking at who actually owned these radar satellites around the world, we started to realize that it wasn't that tackling that challenge of how do you take, it's this great data set, see through clouds, see at night, but on the other side, it's a really complicated data set. And so working And so kind of working that problem of how do you get through there was what we started to realize, like, that's the problem. And so we really shifted our business model to how do I build a community in the remote sensing industry that, so today we bring together so many of the, radar satellites, RF mapping satellites. We even work with optical satellites, and just how do we bring that community, how do we fuse it together and really start to show industries around the world who have never used remote sensing data before what you can do with it. It's exciting.
Adam, I used to have a podcast called Students versus Startups. And they'd ask interesting questions to startups like you. Yep. In fact, they're about your age.
Yep.
And so tell us about your little journey to startup. I mean, good, bad, frustration?
I mean, I think my journey through the actual startup is like any other startup. I mean, it has its ups, it has its downs. It's a total roller coaster. I mean, I remember at one point I had one day, I had hired my best friend, one of my best friends. They moved all the way across the country to come join us. And then we had, like this meeting, and this investor's like, no, we're not investing. I'm like, oh, man. And like it was like this down day because you're like, but you know what happened that afternoon? I had a customer call us and say, hey, guess what? Like, we have this awesome opportunity. Let's go do this. And so it was like, I know that's one little nugget, but I think when I look at the startups, there's good days, there's bad days. It's just a lot of hard work because, what we're doing has never been done before. And so it just takes hard work and a lot of, some things work, some things don't, and keep patiently working through the process.
The Tom Cruise question, of course, is show me the money, and you've had to raise money for your company. In fact, you raised about $15 million. So what are you going to use this money for?
Yeah, so the $15 million for us, what's allowing us to do is it's allowing us to continue to build, really continue to build that infrastructure that is required to connect. There's all these new constellations, or even a lot of current satellites on orbit. And so we're actually building all the software infrastructure that allows us to connect those satellites and process it and turn it into things that someone's interested in. If you think about, the user expectation, how many, you're so used to, the user experiences. You open up your phone, you open up Google, you open up, a map online, and you just expect data to be there. And so we're really working on how do we build that infrastructure such that we can actually take data from these satellites and bring it into a user experience. It's just like that.
It's almost like being a data broker in some ways. That's right. Is that similar? Something like that?
Yeah, data. Yeah, it's been interesting. I think there's been lots of terms for our business model. It could be, in some respects, it's data broker. In other respects, it's more of a turnkey service. So my typical customer we work with, these are folks who are, they're very smart in their individual field, but they probably have not used or even worked with satellite information before, so they don't know. So in general, they may have heard of a satellite company, but they don't know how to, how would I go talk to a satellite? How would I go task a satellite? How do you get the information back? And then how do you process it? And even like the last part, how do we take that data that you get from this radar? And so let's say I may, the simple thing you could say, I detected a vehicle. It doesn't really mean anything until we connect that with other pieces of data and actually bring context to somebody that said, okay, this vehicle here added with this other piece of data means that, this activity, it could be if you're in oil and gas or in insurance or whatever industry, this actually has meaning for you. It's not just a piece of data. So think about your experience. Like if you go look at your house on Google Earth now, you're like, hey, it's my house. But like if you take these analytics, we could start saying, yes, your yard is in good shape, your roof is in good shape. How would you like to take the next step with it?
Elon Musk gave the presentation yesterday. I don't know if you're there or not. He talked about doing innovation faster. Yeah. You could be the poster child for, hey, Adam, come on up here. This guy is innovation faster, which is what you're doing. You're taking different concepts and driving more information from the existing ones that are out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Yeah, it's definitely, to me, it's like I look at the shows like this, and there's so many great components and great companies here, and so for us it's always been about how do we start bringing that community together and building something that is greater than any one individual company can put together.
A community is not a commodity.
Exactly.
Adam, thousands of people from all over the world have listened to this podcast. Yeah. Go to Google and type in Constellations Podcast to get to our show notes page. Here you can get transcripts for all 71 interviews. Also, you can sign up for free email notifications for future podcasts like Adam. Great. It seems that, I go to your website, look around, it seems like your focus has been on energy and oil. So why did you pick those industries?
Effectively what happened is when we first initially got into the analytics is we weren't quite sure. We actually interviewed over 200 companies in all sorts of various industries, and what we ended up finding that in the energy and oil, we happened to find a couple early customers who were very interested in moving forward, and so we decided to work with that industry to get started. And partially because there is, especially in this industry, there is some history of working with advanced technologies to get for advanced data analytics, and so that was a great industry for us to get started. Now as we start to drive into a number of other industries.
So are there, besides oil, are there other industries that might benefit from SAR? For example, maybe construction?
Yeah, construction's one of them. So really, there's a whole variety of industries. So we have looked at, and there's been great interest in what things we're doing. We started in oil and gas. Insurance has great applications. There is, like you said, there's construction, or there's just the general mapping field. So there's a lot of work there. To agriculture, there's certain benefits that using this technology for agriculture could have. To even financial trading. I'm always surprised. To be honest, I'm always surprised at how I find little uses for this technology in all sorts of different applications around the world.
Let's bounce back to your website. You mentioned the companies like financial services are using this alternative data, such as data that SAR provides. Yep. So how are they using the data you provide, and what value does it bring to a financial services firm? Yeah,
so for a financial services firm, I think we have to look at this kind of this concept of if basically what we're doing is we're providing data that it gives us advanced warning gives a company advanced warning as to what's going to happen in the market. So you can see some of it is so for example earlier we did quite a few studies, quotes in a number of newspapers recently where, we measure how much oil is. And so if you have, for example, this week, the price of oil dropping, there's a good question about how is the market actually responding? And so you can actually take and say, I have, a trading firm may have a theory that says, this is what I think is going to happen in the market. And what we can do is we can actually provide data that either proves or disproves that theory. The other side of it is looking, we're basically looking up in a lot of cases, we're looking at parts of the world where you have very limited information. So in general, a lot of the world still runs on monthly reports, like what is happening, what is the economic strength of this country or that country tends to be monthly reports. And if you can actually, during the month, start to get information about that, you can start to have an advantage when you trade, when you are trading, do I make this bet or that bet on the market?
An analyst's job is to really understand what's going on. Then when he tries to move into the area of predictive analytics, well, you better have some solid data before you go make it, because you can lose your job. Isn't that true? This is one more data they can have. Yeah, exactly.
So this basically, in the financial services, this is a data set that allows people to have a better sense of what is the risk that they're taking. Across all the companies we work with, this is really about, decreasing risk, decreasing risk of, a trade you're going to make, or decreasing risk of, I'm going to make an investment into this country. Is this the right thing to do or not to do?
I guess you walk around the floor here at Satellite 2020, you must be some kind of a star, because you were named one of the top 10 hottest satellite companies in 2020 by the publication Via Satellite. Do you sign autographs for that and stuff?
No, definitely not signing autographs. Definitely have not reached that fame yet.
So you got that distinction because you separated yourself somehow. So what's that separation?
I think the key separation is really the business model that we're approaching here. So, I think probably the key why we talked about it at the beginning. I'm a former satellite, used to build satellite, for a living, but now we're doing a software model. And so I think that's what's unique here is really the business model. As we've said, instead of having to build our own satellite, there's a lot of individuals and companies here and around the world who have great capabilities. And our goal as a company is we as a company, we care about what's happening in the world, and we really care about building this community of bringing these technologies together that folks are building and delivering value and an understanding of what's happening.
In software development, talk about being agile, and I think that's what I'm listening and hearing between the lines is that you can take information and you can be agile and adapt it to new situations that are unpredictable.
Yep.
And if you just look at the news here in March 2020, there's a lot of unpredictable things that are going on that they need more information to figure out what's going to impact here, what's going to impact there, and we talk about oil and gas. There's big news just in that little small segment even this week. Yeah,
it's great that you bring up that piece there. I think that's really where we've started. A lot of folks we work with have a lot of value is because, so for example, folks want to know, with the recent virus going around, how is that actually impacting markets? And so we just did a series of studies looking at, what is the production impact on factories around the world? The other side of it is, if an earthquake happens, a hurricane happens, we've done all sorts of great work where, we've just, said, what's the flood extent, what's the damage extent, be able to get that out to, get those to folks as fast as possible. And so a lot of that agility is built into what we do and how we operate.
I always ask my students what their 5-year plan is, where they see themselves in 5 years. But I think in this technology, in this world, it's awful hard to predict. But I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
So where's the future for SAR? Where's it going?
Yeah, so I think the great thing here, what I see is we're right on the cusp of actually having a great, so there's a number of new constellations coming up, both from suppliers who have been in the market for a while and new suppliers entering the market. And so what we're going to see here is we're going to move from an area of just looking at long-term trends to now there's going to be so much commercial available data, we can really start looking at things almost, not quite real-time, but close to real-time. And it's going to really open up that, yes, natural disaster happened. With satellites, we can actually respond very quickly and really make meaningful impact to people's lives for these things. And so that's what I'm really excited about is continuing to build that that community and that system to be able to support those missions.
I walked around the show floor, I'm sure you did too, outside of the fist bumps instead of the handshakes.
Yes.
What innovations have you seen on the floor today?
So for me, I think it's been really interesting just seeing I like seeing how all the different companies have, so I used to be in the satellite world, so, this is not related to this company, but it's really interesting seeing folks move into the higher frequency bands, in a more, in a higher fashion. But I also think, for me too, this time looking around, seeing how many different options there are now for different ground stations, portable ground stations. There's that market's developing, seeing how the small satellites are, really developing, and the data is starting to come from those. It's really cool starting to see all these various technologies. So 5 years ago when I was in the satellite industry, a lot of these were just starting to be ideas, and now I'm actually seeing them as finished products on the floor. Like it's just really exciting to see that those technologies all come together. Yeah,
a lot of people waited lots longer than 5 years for some of the technology you're in today.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
30 years.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of this technology has actually been in the works for a long time.
Yeah. Well, Adam, unfortunately, we are running out of time. I'd like to thank our guest, Adam Maher, CEO of Ursa Space Systems.
Thanks for listening to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. If you like this interview, please subscribe, tell a friend, and give us a review.